The Beck house, built circa 1898 by Henry and Emma Beck, was purchased by doctors Peter and Susan Dominguez in 1996. And now, being a curious person, I thought, okay, doctors of, well, Peter is a doctor of cello at Oberlin.
Not quite, the bigger one.
The big cello, I'm sorry. And Susan is a doctor of English at Case Western Reserve. Is that correct? Okay,
It's pretty close, yes.
okay, close enough. And so I've had a wonderful time going through their house as well. And it's a lovely home. As I said, the Beck home was built in circa 1898 by Henry and Emma Beck. It was purchased by doctors Peter and Susan Dominguez in 1996. They as well have and continue to restore the home, in particular restoring the original chestnut floors and woodwork to a rich, warm brown. The now rare chestnut trees were abundant at the turn of the 20th century and serve as an example of how native materials were used in building and stand as a tribute to what was once here. Are there any Beck descendants here today? We sent out several invitations. Yes? Please? Three generations? Okay, can you stand up and tell us?
Well, I'm Judy Beck Cole. Beck Road was named after my great-grandfather. And there's a little confusion here because this house and the material, the history that I have is not the house. So we're going to have to see what's, look into it. I know that I knew of an Emil Beck because I looked at this Lake Road house here. I said, that's not my grandmother's house. My grandfather's house, I have a picture of the old farm. So there's something not right.
We have to get the library and their collection there.
And I have a short story here that my grandmother I have found after she had passed, and it said a short history of the Beck family. So we have to look into it.
So
There was an Emil Beck that was a cousin, I believe, and it said the Beck boys. My father was the only child who was Walter Beck.
Okay, all right.
So
the Dominguezes would love to copy that information if you would share it with them. So thank you very much for coming.
that family was bigger than we thought.
Yes, it is. An ordinance designating the Beck house only, located at 32211 Lake Road as a historic landmark. Whereas the Avon Lake Planning Commission has, at its meeting of December 5th, 2017, recommended to council that the Beck house only, located at 32211 Lake Road, not Lear, be granted historic landmark designation. And whereas the request for historic landmark designation for the Beck house has been reviewed by the Avon Lake Historic Preservation Commission according to Planning and Zoning Code Chapter 1268. And whereas the Beck house was built by Henry and Emma Beck in 1898 in traditional homestead style, and whereas the house was erected on property with a small vineyard and farm which was subdivided through the years and currently is approximately an 1/8 of an acre lot, and whereas the original barn was raised in the 1960s, the cistern was filled in the early 2000s, and the iron water pump remains. And whereas the house has a full stone cellar and walkout stairs and functioning doors, and some of the original chestnut hardwood floors have been refinished. And whereas the house has received typical updates over the years, such as electricity to replace the gas lights, plumbing installed in the 1920s, a gas furnace to replace the coal furnace, the excavation of a dirt slate cellar floor in 2010, and the original slate roof replaced. And whereas all remodeling has been thoughtfully and meticulously planned to retain the original character of the house. Whereas Historic designation gives residents of our community a deeper sense of understanding and appreciation of Avon Lake heritage. Now therefore, be it ordained by the Council of the City of Avon Lake, State of Ohio, that Council of the City of Avon Lake does hereby grant the Beck House, house only, located at 32211 Lake Road, the designation of historic landmark. Signed, Martin E. Donald, Council President, and Gregory J. Zilka, Mayor.
Depends on which story you tell. Go ahead. You want me to hold that?
Thank you so much, Bobby. I second everything. Thank you for the commission. Thank you for everything that you've done. Really making, as part of the Oberlin Conservatory, conserving things is very dear to our hearts here. And really making things a living legacy is very important to us. I'll tell a little story. Susan had just finished her master's at Michigan State, and I was an adjunct at Oberlin, and I was coming down, and I received a full-time position in '96. And so for her present, we went and spent a week in the French Quarter in New Orleans, and we fell in love with the architecture. We loved the French and the Spanish. And when we came up here, and we knew we were moving to Oberlin or Avon Lake eventually, we looked at about a dozen homes. And when we entered this Beck house, it was magic. It was just magic. We could feel the place that had all the charm that we were looking for. And plus, the dozen homes we looked at, half of them were screaming at us. So we were very in tune to that. And since then, we've met just fabulous people in Avon Lake. And our neighbors, Jeff and Doreen, are sitting right there. Give them a round of applause.
They've been great neighbors for years.
They really have helped us and seen the transformation in this house. And I think like Doug said and Judy says, I mean, once you tear down something, there's always surprises. It never ceases to amaze us. But thank you so much. And here's Susan Rose.
So, since there's other Becks here, maybe you would know the name Shirley Beck. Many years ago, must have been 15 years ago already, a couple was in town for their 65th or some ridiculous number high school reunion, right? A big number. And they pulled up to the front and said, "Could you tell me, did there used to be a barn here?" And I said, "Yes, there was a barn here. This was the Beck house. The barn was taken out in the 60s. And she said, "Oh, I was born in this house. My grandma raised me in this house," her grandma, Emma Beck. And I said, "Well, we just finished the restoration of the upstairs bathroom." I said, "If you think you can make it up the stairs, I'd love to show it to you." And the staircase is like this, right? It's like a ladder. So
That's how we say in shape right there.
So she made it up the stairs and she got into the bathroom and she started crying and she said, "Oh, my grandma used to give me baths in that bathtub." And then she said, "But grandma would never go to the toilet in the house. She was afraid of the toilet, so she would go to the barn." And Grandma Beck lived in that house from 1898 until her husband and son passed in the flu epidemic in the early 30s, and then she lived there until 1952. And it was a rental for a little while. We're not quite sure how that story all fits together. But we're only the 4th owners, and we just love spending our money on that house.